So I'm here to talk to you about soaring safety and using data to improve and understand what our safety trends are, what we need to improve, and how things are working. So I used to know a gentleman who would give a talk, and he would throw in a spoilers page at the very beginning. And so when the slide is over with, you can feel free to go to sleep, leave the room. You'll have learned everything you need to know about the talk from my spoilers. So we need to collect data. We collect data for a variety of reasons. It comes from a variety of communities, but it does require the community to participate. There's no one person who's going to collect all the data that we need. And so I'm going to talk about where we get data, where it comes from now, where we need to get more data from. Some significant pieces of data that we know we could get are missing, and we'd like to figure out how to get that, where in the community it exists, and how we can extract it from our community. What new sources of data do we have, and what can we do that use with that data? What are the techniques that we can use that would provide new insights to us that helps us understand what that data is telling us and what we should be doing as a community to improve our safety cultures and be better pilots? Looking at what the airlines and the military have done for the last 15 or 20 years, and what the FAA is telling us to do is they want us to implement safety management programs. And that seems like a really far out problem that's very structured and hard to follow, hard to implement inside our glider community. But we have found a safety management program that is actually easy to implement, provides us with a better structure for going forward, and I'm going to talk about that as well at the end of my talk. And then there's this new thing, you might have heard of it, it's called artificial intelligence and deep learning. It is using data and mining data to extract correlations and information. How can we use those techniques in our gliding community to better understand what's happening, what isn't happening, and what should be happening? So where are we collecting data? The data we have can be used for a couple purposes. We can use data for short-term analysis and trend intervention. We see something happens, we go out and we fix it. We can also look at the long term. Over courses of months, days, years, and decades, these are the things that are going on. Here's what we need to do and focus on in our world and our community to address those. One of the big ones is landings. Landings historically have been 60 to 70% of the accidents in our community. I was looking for something one day and I was digging through some 1960s versions of Soaring magazine, and I stumbled across the safety corner. And the author was lamenting the fact that 60% of the accidents were in the landing phase of flight. My current stats will show 56% of the accidents in the landing phase of flight. So, are we making trends? Are we making any improvements? Have we changed how people are crashing in that area? And I'll talk a little bit about that. And then in order to be effective, these two elements need to stand out. The data we collect and use needs to be anonymous. We are not looking to punish or blame individuals for any action they might do or not do. We want in the Safety Foundation to understand the trends and the directions that the community is taking. And we're using individual data sources to make those determinations, not to blame someone, but to learn from people's mistakes. How many of you have ever made a mistake in anything, in soaring? The old adage is, we need to learn from others because we can't afford to make all the mistakes ourselves. So if you give us data, we promise not to tell anybody that it was you, but we will use that information wisely to help our community and your friends and colleagues learn from your experience and benefit from that. And then it also has to be actionable. just gathering data, just looking at things, but never coming up with a solution. How do we use this data to make a change in our behavior? Either the individual's behavior or the organization's behavior. If your club or commercial operator allows you to do risky things and encourages that, or if the soaring community as a whole encourages people to make high-risk behavior the norm, as Ron talked about in our safety meeting, normalization of deviation, then we're never going to change our culture. So we need to have clear, concrete actions. This is what we need to do as a community to change our behavior organizationally and individually to reduce the accidents that we're seeing. Where did I get the data? I get the data from multiple sources. The SSA, the Soaring Safety Foundation, has for the last 5 years sent out letters and asking you to fill in and return a stamped, self-addressed postcard. That postcard asks you for four basic pieces of information. How many aircraft are on your field? Gliders, tow planes. How many of those are club-owned aircraft? Because I can do simple math, and I can say he had a total number, and these are the clubs. These must be what left over were owned by privates or syndicates. How many launches did you do? And how many of those were in your club gliders? Again, simple math, what's left over is privates. And how many hours are your club gliders flying? You need to capture that information to fill out your annual inspections, or maybe 100-hour inspections. So the information is there. Would you share it with us? And I'll show you some information later on in the deck about what we're getting, how I'm taking that data, and what it means for us as an organization. The FAA also sends out to some random number of people, maybe based on their response, a letter saying, please fill out this survey information. That data is posted on their website. And so I can compare what people are telling the FAA to what people are telling us. And that is providing some illumination right now, and I'm not sure what it really means, but I'll show you what I'm seeing. We know that in the US, the National Transportation Safety Board is the organization that we report accidents to, not the FAA. So we look at that data. There's what they call the Carroll database now is the front end. I can look and see where accidents are occurring, what's going on, and extract that information and make reports. That's the report information that you'll see showing up in the magazine, in the SSF annual report, and in this presentation. NASA has an incident reporting system. The Soaring Safety Foundation created an incident reporting system. It went online in 2006, and it has been so popular that as of last week, there were 30 incidents reported in the database. And I'll show you the comparison about what we're getting with what other countries are doing, and hopefully we can spur some information to get incidents reported rather than just waiting for an accident to occur. And then lastly, there's these IGC files that show up that people use and post. They're on OLC, there's WeGlide, that's here at the convention. There are other places that are storing these IGC files. The SSA posts all the sanction contest files online. What can we extract from that? And I'll talk a little bit about what kind of information might be hidden in those files that we can use for safety implications. So this is what we have now, the NTSB data. The GAJSC, the General Aviation Joint Safety Committee. This is an organization the FAA put together. The Soaring Safety Foundation joined this in 2019. And when we joined, they were talking about a kiting accident that had killed one of our tow pilots. And their discussion was the tow pilot lost control of the airplane. And obviously he was at fault. And they completely disregarded this big sailplane 200 feet behind, attached with a rope that was going up on a kite. No wonder the tow plane crashed. So our engagement, we're now here, FAA, EAA, AOPA, SSF, the insurance companies, NAFTA, all the three little alphabet groups are involved in this. And they are generating some interesting data and observations. AOPA puts out the null report so I can get some information about GA as a whole, the surveys and our surveys. This is one of the projects we can get from GAJSC. This is called a Pareto chart. The bottom here indicates the various categories that are ICAO information. So the first one here, the biggest bar, is loss of control in flight, LOCI. The next one is called unknown, and the one after that is structural component failure power plant. So the engine quit for some reason. There's just no information right now on why that happened. As it notes here, the first 5 categories are 80% of our accidents. This is a GA, we're no different. The little red bar here is our friends flying experimental home-built aircraft. Their accident rates are probably comparable to ours right now. And loss of control, this is 44%. So the Pareto chart here shows the cumulative. So again, the first 5 hits 80%. And you can see there's a long tail of ways people have invented to damage aircraft or kill themselves. But they're minor. So if you're looking to address the safety issues, do you focus on one of these little long tails that occurs relatively infrequently, or something like LOC, where you have a major impact on people? Obviously, you're going here. And so there's study groups now inside GAJSC to focus on these things where the major accidents are occurring, to try to identify common threads, causes, and responses. I'm going to jump now mostly into the glider world because this is a glider convention. This is the data coming from the NTSB data source. This red line here is the number of accidents that occurred in that year, total number of accidents. And you can see the trend line is that we're going in the right direction. We're having fewer and fewer accidents. There are very small numbers, so this is going from 22 to 27. So a small number of accidents makes a huge impact on our statistics. But the general trend is going in the right direction. This trend here, this is the number of fatal accidents. And that is what's very concerning to us in the Soaring Safety Foundation, is that on average, and that average has not changed in the last 30 years, is 6 of our friends and colleagues die in gliders every year. One year we had 0. We had a couple, these were down in 2 or 3, but on average, 6 of our friends die every year. So the question for us has always been, do we focus on reducing the number of accidents in total, or should we focus more on trying to stop people from killing themselves in the aircraft? I tend to look at things in tabular form. Other people are more visual and like pictures and graphs. So this is what I generate for myself every year. I've got this 6-year moving average, and I have a total here, and you can see here the percentage of accidents occurring in the various phrases. Unknown here means either there's nothing in the NTSB database to give me any clue what happened, or it's too early and they haven't completed their investigation. The key here is PT3, premature termination of the tow, non-fatal and fatal. FF is cruise flight or free flight in the glider world, non-fatal and fatal, landings, obvious, and the unknowns. What I noticed here when I put this structure out and broke out the fatals versus non-fatals, that the numbers here jumped out and confirmed what we've always known. The largest number of accidents are occurring in the landing phase of flight, followed by launch, followed by cruise. That seems pretty obvious. We're not cruising along, scud running in gliders, flying along a treetop height for long periods of time. We want to be basically as high above the terrain as we can, so it's not a threat to us. But when something goes wrong and someone dies, this picture changed drastically. It is those cruise flights accidents where we're losing most of our friends. They're not dying when they try to skid their turn from base to final. They are dying when they try to impulsively turn the glider when the rope breaks at 150 feet to go back. That's a training issue. And they are dying when they stall the aircraft at 300 feet trying to scratch out from a low save. That's a systemic problem in our community where over the decades we have idolized those people who report, I can make that low save and get back. So this number here, smallest number of accidents, hugest percentage of them that turn out really, really bad. Mr. Wander. So the question is, how am I categorizing and putting aircraft in these three main categories, launch, cruise, or landing? So the launch is pretty obvious. The glider never left the airport environment, and it's trying to turn around from a couple hundred feet. The landing is, if it's at an airport, there's usually witnesses, the glider is seen in the pattern. So again, those are pretty clear. If the aircraft has crashed in a field, I try to look at the condition. Was the gear down? Were there witnesses that reported seeing the aircraft attempting to land? If the pilot survived, did he tell me he was landing? If it's clear, it goes into this category landing. If I find that the wreckage has almost obviously stall spun because of the wreckage, the damage to the aircraft, how it was configured, it's either going to go in the cruise flight or unknown. If I can't determine anything other than here's the wreckage and I've got no witnesses, no observations, it's probably going to go in unknown. Otherwise, it goes in cruise. So graphically, this is the same information. Some people really like to see graphs. So again, pie chart, there it is. There's landing, there's cruise, there's takeoffs and the unknowns. And when you look at where the fatals are occurring, unknowns are showing up pretty big in here, but this is the cruise flights. Heinz? The question is, do we get the GPS trace data from accident aircraft? Typically, no. Why not? Because we're not as deeply engaged with the NTSB in the accident investigation phase as we would like. And that's an area that we as the Soaring Safety Foundation are trying to figure out how do we get more engaged in the accident investigations so we can get that data and help with the analysis and understanding. Just as I noted earlier in the talk, the GAJSC had no clue that the glider could upset the tow plane. They put all the blame on a tow pilot who was just unfortunately along for the ride at that point. This is again just the data from this year, from 2022 last year. Here again, landings, the unknowns, cruise, and there are a couple ground ops and some things that didn't fit into my normal 4 categories. I look at data from as Soaring Society has 10 regions. 2 of them were combined several years ago. I'm not comparing region to region because our regions are so largely diverse and have such different terrain. What I'm focusing on here is the average historical trend and the year that this year this happened. So you can see in this 2-4, all of a sudden, instead of having a little over 3 accidents on average, they had 7. So we need to understand what went on in this area of the country that caused the number of accidents in that location to double. whereas down here, Region 7, Region 6, they're doing pretty well. And then this is the fatal information. Again, numbers are small, but again, compare the historical average to what happened in that year, not region to region. And then this is the data from the NTSB. They do a probable cause, and here it is, loss of control, and I break it out if it's clear the aircraft stalled after loss of control. And the red bar shows the accidents in the launch phase of flight, the yellow bar is the cruise phase of flight, and the green bar is the landing phase of flight. And if you add these two numbers together, it doesn't matter what phase of flight you're in. When the aircraft departs from a couple hundred feet above the ground, it's bad. We see some things, CFITs, flight and IFR, IMC conditions, fuel mismanagement in our motor gliders, a couple of mid-airs, but LOC, stall spin accidents, that's where people are dying. That's where we're focusing our attention on trying to really understand exactly what they're doing. Are we training people badly? Is there a culture issue? Is there a structural issue? The NTSB. The question was, what was the categories were derived from, and it's the NTSB. Graphically, here it is, the number of accidents and the percentage of accidents in the GA world. You might notice that it went to a logarithmic scale, otherwise the glider world would just be a little red line in the bottom. The commercial world, this is the commercial people flying under Part 91, doing commercial ops. This used to be the photo op people, maybe, I don't think it's any sightseeing groups, but it's not the 131 carriers and those people. And then this is the glider world. You can see the trend line again, shows the right trend. Looking at the rates, these are the accident rates using 100,000 hours per the airplanes and 100,000 launches for the gliders. And you can see, and the data that this data of hours and times is the FAA data. When the FAA did a survey, I went and extracted that from the database and calculated these rates. I've got no confidence that this rate here is anywhere near right. But one thing that does jump out to me is that if it's wrong, it is wrong by a factor of 5 to 7. So if it reported that we were doing 100,000 launches, we'd have to be doing 500,000 launches for the number to drop down to somewhere in this range. And I don't believe that that's really a possibility. Yeah, and I'll show you some, the comment is, am I comparing apples to oranges by talking about hours versus launches? And as my friend Stephen Brown from the Boston FISDO reminds me, if you get into an airplane and do training, you might do 10 or 15 launches in an hour because you're doing touch and goes. So we really don't have a good, I have not yet looked at to see what kind of response is. Are the number of launches close to what we're seeing in our training world and airplane world, or are they very different? Again, this is what I can pull out from a naive look at the data. I don't trust that that's giving me really good information. And then these are the fatal sides. Again, I used launches versus hours for the gliders. Graphically, again, what's happening. So this compares what the FAA says versus what the data I get from the survey for the last 5 years that we have been requesting data for. And so you can see here at the very beginning, the data that the FAA was capturing and the data that we were capturing is about the same. So maybe with the data is okay. But here, all of a sudden, it starts to diverge rapidly. And in 21, the FAA has not released the data. They claim that there's a problem with the data, and they have not released it. 2 years later, they're still not sure what the data they have collected says. So again, this trend here says the number of launches is increasing and the number of hours has not really decreased as much as we might have expected, while the FAA data says our numbers are going down and down and down. I need some more information to understand what's correct, and that's why I'm asking everyone, every organization to respond with their data, so I have some what I consider good data. The data that I have here is about a 30% response rate from our community. And a couple of years ago, I had one of my trustees go through the Where to Fly map and said, how many gliders do we have at each location? Because the Where to Fly map gives me that basic information. When we totaled up the numbers and we looked at the response, we had about 30% of the gliders listed in our response. Is that statistically valid? I'm not sure, but at least it gives me a good warm feeling that we're in the right trend. The more responses, the better our data will be. So send in your data. I already had one response so far. I know the postcards have gone out. Graphically, again, in pie chart or line graph form rather than bar charts. This is the exact same thing I had before. The GA, the number of accidents based on hours and launches. So going forward, what do we need? We need more incident reports. We need to understand what's happening before it gets to an accident. So the database that we provide on our website is very underutilized, and I'd like to understand why. Is it too complicated? Is it unknown? Is it too cumbersome to log onto our website to do that? Any insights you have, feel free to share them with me. You can email webmaster@soaringsafety.org and it comes to my inbox. Let's understand, and as a community, understand what's going on. What can flight logs tell us? I've got a slide that I think will give us some information about what flight logs can tell us. What's AI and the machine learning world going to tell us? And where we can move with modern safety management programs. So as the TSP, Training and Safety Panel, one of the standing committees of OSTIV, we meet on a regular basis. I happen to be co-chair along with my friend Henrik Svensson. And a couple years ago, and this is 2020 data, we asked the various countries who were in our meeting what kind of data they had, and this is the response I got. Here is the data from the US saying the number of accidents and the number of incidents. This is what my friend Henrik said is going on in Sweden for 2020. The number of accidents, the number of incident reports. This is what my friend Dave Donaldson from Canada said. Here's the number of accidents, here are the number of incidents. In Canada, they require every glider club to submit all their incident reports back to the national organization. I don't know how they enforce it, but they do. Jim? Yes, these are glider. The question was, are these glider or GA? These are just the gliders. Robert? So the question is, how do we decide whether it was an accident or an incident? In the US, it's... Okay. So in the US, I can tell whether it's an accident because it shows up in the NTSB database. There are very clear reporting requirements. I'm assuming, and I would have to verify whether my colleagues in Europe or Canada have similar. I'm sure the Canadians have something similar to our NTSB. So they can get an accident. They can clearly say that. What then is reportable incident? The organization is responding and the national organization is saying, we want to know what's going on. Our people, why did that tow terminate? Was there a threat that they observed, which would be an incident? There was a runway incursion, or there was a mechanical failure, or I just decided I didn't want to go at this point and got off. That may not be an incident. So the comment is, do we have a list, or at least a partial list, of reportable things we would like people to report as incidents, and we'll take that and figure out how to get that information out. Right. Yes, I know. I know the BGA does. They did not happen to have a representative at the meeting where I got this data from. So I didn't go begging them for it. But you're right, and I'm not going to do things ad hoc or alone. I've got these communities. I can go ask them, what are you using for criteria to make your reports? And use that as a starting point. IGC traces. It has long been recognized and used that you can use an IGC trace with something like CU and analyze your flight and figure out where your performance issues are. Where did I slow down? Where can I go faster? How many thermals did I use? Did I use all of them right, all of them left? How am I making mistakes from a personal standpoint? That's great, but I can't analyze thousands or hundreds of thousands of traces using a visual graphic tool like this. I need to do something better. And so how do I automatically extract and understand issues or potential safety threats from an IGC file? So I started with myself with a list of things that I could find, and is there a potential safety threat with that? So I noticed that looking at an IGC file, I could tell how your launch method worked. Did you aero tow, self-launch, or winch launch? It's actually pretty trivial to get that information out of an IGC file. But while it will give me numbers, it doesn't really give me any safety implications. What about low altitude maneuvering where people are dying, loss of control? PT3s. Are people impulsively returning when the rope breaks or they pull the release? Or have they got a plan, and can I understand that by looking at the trace? That's a question I don't have an answer to. Low saves, again, low altitude maneuvering, poor decision-making skills, landouts with poor patterns. Are they wandering around for 5 minutes, scratching and looking before they finally commit at 300 feet to land? Or do they fly a full pattern even when they're landing in a field? That's kind of information I can extract. What it means, I don't know yet. And then what about in the pattern at your home field? Are people making standardized patterns? Are they doing strange things? And then what is the safety implications of that? Engine operations, you got a turbo, it requires an air start. If you do an air start starting at 300 feet, is that a safety threat? Or should you be starting at 3,000 feet? Is that a different safety threat? Airspace incursions, and then correlating multiple traces. Can we extract information about near misses? I know that the FLARM people have done this to find missing aircraft and other things, but what can we do automatically to understand this, and is there a safety implication of that? This chart is not designed to say, yes, this behavior is a safety threat. It is to say, that's something I could extract. Is there something in there that would impact our safety culture with that information? Then using AI and ML or DL, can we learn? Right now, these tools were designed to create correlations. You look at this data, you look at these information, and you can correlate this action with that action. It is not causal. We would need to go and say, if we're looking for this, we see these kind of events, we see these numbers, is there a causality factor associated with that? And then, again, general statistics. We're not looking for individual behavior. We're looking for safety issues and threats that affect us as a community. We will never publish information identifying an individual by looking at traces. Lastly on my talk here is the safety management programs. The military, the airlines have very structured and rigid safety management programs. We have been talking about one that the Germans have been promoting for several years called FlyTop. And what we're going to do is, historically, this is where we've gone. We've done regulations. These regulations were written in blood, so we know what will cause people to die. So we write a rule to say, don't do that anymore. We've moved on to human factors, try to understand why people are making decisions, the 5 hazardous thoughts and their antidotes. Now we're moving into, let's not look at where these just human factors issues, but let's be proactive about stopping them. So you get to the Fly Top program, which says, start looking for things rather than waiting for it. We've all heard the phrase, that individual was an accident waiting to happen. Well, why didn't we intervene and stop that individual before he had the accident or incident? That's a proactive safety management program, learning from our errors and intervening as well as just noting that it happened, rather than waiting for it to occur and doing the post-flight analysis and then writing up the rule or the regulation. So this is my challenge. I've been doing this slide at our flight instructor refresher courses for the year. In order to get this data, we need to have our members proactively look for problems. So I want to challenge you at your organization to, every day you fly, have one reported potential threat. See if every day you can see something in your operation that you said, we should fix that. And these are a list of things that might be things you might want to look for. You know, missing checklist items. Pilot self-reports, I got interrupted in my checklist. If it happens once, it's a one-off. But what if every day 12 of the 13 pilots who are getting launched report that they missed a checklist item? Maybe there's something going on, like the wing runner is interrupting them in the middle of a checklist. Not intentional, but that would be an issue that you could fix. Tail dollies left on when there's nobody there. How many of you fly K-21s and have burn holes in the headrest of the back seat? And then tow outs, maneuvering the aircraft around on the ground as well as in the air. As Mr. Costello will tell us, a significant portion of our accidents are ground losses. So let's identify those problems as well as the in-flight ones and take action as a community to figure out what are best practices so we don't have these things. So in conclusion, there is a significant amount of incidents and accidents that the data is missing. We don't know why these are occurring. We know the numbers are there, but we really don't understand the rates or the causal factors or the mitigation strategies we as a community should be implementing. Using these techniques, we can move in that direction. Using flight logs, I think that'll provide us some information. We need a place to get them, and we need the confidence from the community that we will not expose their individual information, but we will use it to look for trends, for issues across the community, and report out what people can do to stop having these problems in the future. It's not enough for us to say what we've been doing in the past, here's the numbers. We need to start moving into the next thing for the proactive management programs of saying, here's how we as a community can move forward. We have moved with that, with the goal-oriented approach, which we issued about a decade ago, to say, stop teaching people to go to the IP, so when they're low, they fly to the IP. But have a plan to land the aircraft, even if they got back to the airport low. And if we implement these and give you the tools to do that and look at modern analysis methods, we can make a difference in our community and have more of our friends at conferences like this as we go forward.